Hello Wastelanders, Vlad here, and by viewer request I'm going to show you how to merge foundations with the front of your Brotherhood of Steel Prefabs so you get a nice clean look to your camp. Let's jump on in. We're going to start things off with the simplest and move to the more complex. So we're starting with this field station prefab, and we're going to start this one by placing down the field station just as a guide for building our blueprint. And we're going to put this foundation centered up with the door of the field station. And then we're going to build a U-shape around it with our other foundations. Okay, so we got one side, and then we're going to build a U-shape on the other. And now that we have that in place, you should have something that looks like this. From here, we're going to temporarily store our field station. We're going to place some foundations where it was currently sitting. And I've just got these turned to a different pattern so you can kind of see where we're adding them, because we're going to pick them up in just a second. What we need to do is add some walls in here. And you want it with the wallpaper side of the wall facing inward. And we want one on either side of these new foundations and one from the center. Once these are placed, we can remove these foundations that we just placed. Okay, from here we're going to place down our field station once again, and we're going to carefully kind of line it up with this center wall that we have, because this is where we want our foundation to be centered against this prefab. And you can get it placed and then pick it up and then move it around to get things centered. And it doesn't have to be butt up against the foundation. Actually, I recommend not putting it right up against it, because then you have less of a chance of things saying they collide when you go to place your blueprint. But you should have something that looks like this once you put that prefab centered up with your door frame. Now we're going to remove a couple of foundations because we don't need them as part of our blueprint. And now we're going to blueprint everything that's left. So you should have 3 sets of walls and foundations in the blueprint and the field station, and that's all. So let's quickly create our blueprint. There we go. And you can now place this, and those foundations will flip and merge with your field station. Now if you have trouble placing this, make sure that the skirting of those wooden foundations is above the ground. If you sink them below, you may have trouble placing those into the ground. Now we're going to move on to the Brotherhood of Steel Tower, and we're going to just go ahead and place it again as a guide for placing our foundations around this to create our blueprint. I do recommend putting this a little bit higher up out of the ground just to make moving around your foundations a little bit easier. You don't have to worry about the terrain being perfectly flat if you give yourself a little buffer by pulling it above the ground a little bit. So again, for this one, we're going to start by centering up foundation with the front door and building this U-shape around our prefab. So once we've built our U-shape, it should look like this. Okay, and just like the field station, we're going to go ahead and temporarily store that. And we're going to place our center foundations again. This time I used the same color foundation, so it's harder to tell where these are at, but it's the same pattern as we did with the field station. So if you watch that one, then you are familiar with the technique we're doing here. And you got to make sure that these walls are facing toward the area that was previously open and had the tower in it. So I put this one facing the wrong direction, got to flip that and correct it. And then once those are placed, we are ready to start the final portion of this. We're going to remove our center foundations once again. And then we're going to place our tower in the center. Now for the tower, I did have a good hard time getting it to place. It kind of wanted to jump either really far behind the foundations or right up in my face. So if you can get it placed, just go ahead and place it, and then you can manipulate it a little bit easier than just trying to play around with it jumping all over the place. It seems to get tamed a little bit once you placed it on the ground at least once. So this is where you want to take some time and get things lined up, because however you align this before you create your blueprint is how things are going to align when we place the blueprint for the merge. So to see how offset this is, we want to play around with it and try and get it to where it's straight. And for this one I did make it flush with the foundation because I wanted it to look like the foundations came right up to the edge of it, but you don't have to get it right up against here. You can kind of make it to where they stick out a little bit. Again, take the time to align this so that once you get your final result, it lines up the way you want it to. I also found that stepping into the door of the Brotherhood of Steel Tower and looking out kind of helps you with that alignment and deciding whether you've got it where you want it. And it should look like this before we create our blueprint. So we're going to blueprint this foundation, the wall, the tower, and the other sets of foundations and walls. There shouldn't be anything else inside of your blueprint. Okay, and now you just have to place your blueprint. And again, the same as with the other one, don't try and sink the foundations all the way into the ground. You may get an error by doing that when you try and place it. And now we can just remove those walls and place our foundations in the front. And we're good to go. Alright, so we're moving on to the hardest one, and that's the armory. And you're going to start by putting these foundations in the corners right next to those stairs. And then our next step is going to be putting 2 foundations centered and flush with this front portion, the front lip of the foundation that is at the stairs for the main entrance. So we're going to go ahead and do that. Now this is going to require some alignment. So if you start playing around with the next steps and things are diagonal or colliding where they shouldn't, then you're going to need to maybe restart and make sure that you set those original foundations without any sort of weird offsetting angles. But we're going to place a foundation attached to the first one, remove the middle one, and then slide it over. And then I like to build out these other foundations around what I've already placed to kind of check the alignment of what we just did before moving on. You can see here that with my first placement of this, I ended up with a gap as I came around to the other side. And we don't want that because we want these to look like they're flush together. So we're going to actually redo that initial placement of the secondary foundations. Again, the starting point is centered with the stairs. And then we place a foundation attached to it going out to the side. We remove the original foundation, and then we can freely move the other one we had attached to the side of it to align with that foundation we put in the corner. All right, so we got that aligned pretty well. We're going to test this out, come around to the other side and make sure it's flush with the other one that we put in the corner. And this time you'll see that it aligns really nice. So I was able to slide that over. This is going to be a lot easier on flat ground. I wouldn't try doing this on sloped ground because then things are going to jump around with your foundations and they're not going to be level. So once that's in place, we're actually going to build some foundations out to the side. And I'll show you an aerial view of this once I get everything placed so that you can replicate it with your build. But it ends up looking kind of like a Space Invader sitting in front of our armory. Okay, so this is the shape I created with the foundations once we got those side ones placed. Like I said, it looks like a little Space Invader ship. All right, from here we need to place some walls because that's the foundation of how the floor flip works. So we're going to place one here, and then we're going to place one here. And now we need to actually put some other walls in place, and we're going to use the catwalks to do that. So I'm going to build a basic U shape, and I use the stubby one, a right angled one, a half length one, another right angle, and then a stubby one again. And that'll allow us to place a wall in this location. Again, we need that facing the center of our build with the wallpaper side. And then we can remove our original wall we used to get that there. And then for this other one we placed, we're going to do the exact same thing. Stubby one, right angle, a half length one, right angle, stubby one again, and now we're going to place our wall. There we go. Again, we can remove the scaffolding we created with the catwalks and remove our original wall. And now that we've got those two walls placed, we can remove all these extra foundations, and we'll be left with 3 in place on this side. This is what it should look like now. All right, we're going to do the exact same thing in mirror on the other side. So just because seeing it helps you commit it to memory, I'm going to go ahead and let that play through at a little bit faster speed, but it's the exact same process we used on the other side, just flipping it for this side. Okay, now we can remove our extra foundations. All right, and you should be left with this. 6 foundations, 4 walls, all facing the inside. And we're going to blueprint all of that as you saw it on the screen. And I chose this pattern because it will consistently place the blueprint, whereas other versions of the blueprint I created had a hard time actually placing, especially at my camp. But this one will place pretty easily. Get an example here. There we go. Put a few foundations in, remove our walls that helped us flip things around. And there we go. We have floors merged with our armory that are perfectly in alignment. So there you go, everybody. Those are the tricks that I have for merging foundations with the Brotherhood of Steel Prefabs in Fallout 76. If you have anything you'd like to see, leave me some comments. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for the latest content from Vladministrator Gaming. Until next time, I'll see you in the Wasteland.